Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of the series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled Living a Fluid Life. The talk was given by Juanita Violini on June 21st, 2025 via Zoom. Juanita is an artist and writer-producer of interactive mystery entertainment who has been a student of the spiritual path for over 35 years. In this talk, she speaks about our attempts to make life solid, to validate our separate existence with the stories and projections the mind creates, which overlay reality. She discusses her own experience in learning to live a fluid life and going with what the universe provides. Juanita says that coincidence and synchronicity signify the fluidity of life leaking out. She discusses some of the work of researchers who have explored consciousness and considers teachings of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche and Lee Lozowick. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Juanita Violini.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Living a fluid life. I try to give a talk of something that I'm working on, that I really need to focus on myself. Living a fluid life. What I mean by that is engaging life with what life gives us rather than the projections we overlay on top of it. So being alive in these bodies, we connect with reality through the senses, right? Most people, I'm assuming most people, are visual. For me, it's for sure, but people, whether they're tactile, whatever, interact and experience life through the senses. And right away, it goes to the mind. So I always had this vision, and getting ready for this talk has reinforced it for me. Our bodies, our machines are like little movie projectors, the old kind, the reel to reel, where the film would go through and the wheels would turn and the light would project it on. And so the way I think about it is that here we are, we're the projectors. And we all have on these 3D glasses. And we're watching the movie. Our mind is showing us through these 3D glasses. And reality is the movie screen. So as we walk around through life, we're walking into the movie that we are creating. So the movie that we're watching and the projection, so both inside and outside of us in this scenario, is happening in duality. The projection, the life that we're projecting, is solid. So what we're doing most of the time, at least me, is making life solid rather than having it be fluid. So the movie we're watching, it's solid. It never changes. Were you ever have a Viewmaster when you were a kid and you put the little wheel with the 12 different pictures in and you just click, 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 and it's the same thing goes around and around? So that's kind of what I see my life is often like. It's the same 12 pictures going around. But life is fluid. Reality is fluid and dynamic, and it's always changing. Every moment it changes. We don't usually notice. So we like to make things solid. And I'm going to read this quote from Trungpa that talks about why we do this. In order to cut through the ambition of ego, we must understand how we set up me and my territory, how we use our projections as credentials to prove our existence. The source of the effort to confirm our solidity is an uncertainty as to whether or not we exist. Driven by this uncertainty, we seek to groove out our own existence by finding a reference point outside of ourselves, something with which to have a relationship, something solid to feel separate from. And that's Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche from The Myth of Freedom, page 19. So if we surrender to the fluidity of life, or even rather than say surrender, if we allow the fluidity of life, then we would see life as it is rather than as we are. For me, where I'm at, when I say surrender to the fluidity of life, this is as much as I can manage. My mind used to be like, oh, surrender, it's an all-time permanent thing, or I'm not doing it right, or it's not happening right. And now I realize that it's a form of self-sabotage to set up an expectation or an assumption that I can't possibly meet. And so allowing life to be fluid is something that we watch for or observe or try to observe as much as we can when we can. And whatever happens with that happens. Most of what we do with our projections is that we create this illusion of life being solid. We're always going to have stories in our heads about what is happening, about what we see. It's not that we're going to get to a spot where there's no stories. It's our attachment and our belief in the stories that we have to give up or let go of. So I'm going to read Trungpa's quote here. Another quote, same page, about why we make life solid and why that's a silly thing to do. The attempt to confirm our solidity is very painful. Constantly, we find ourselves slipping off the edge of a floor which had appeared to extend. Then we must attempt to save ourselves from death by immediately building an extension to the floor in order to make it appear endless again. We think we are safe on our seemingly solid floor, but then we slip off again and have to build another extension. We do not realize that the whole process is unnecessary, that we do not need a floor to stand on, that we have been building all these floors on ground level. There was never any danger of falling or need to support, in fact, our occupation of extending the floor to secure the ground. It's a big joke, the biggest joke of all, a cosmic joke. So what do you guys think of that, of those quotes? Do you see yourself endlessly extending the floor to have something solid to stand on? And do you have a sense of the ground?
In my life, it's been more like a door opens and I choose to go through it, which to me is kind of a way of talking about being fluid. It's happened several times, and it's taken my life in different directions that I wouldn't have taken if I was just kind of locked into something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think I created the door. I just chose to go through it, and it took me into a different life. It took me into a different understanding of life. So to me, there's a fluid sense to all that.
Yes. So do you see going through the door as letting go of any projections you might have had in a circumstance?
Yeah, sometimes that's in hindsight.
Oh, hindsight's great, isn't it?
Like when I go through the door, I'm in a different world in a sense. You can go so far, you can't go back. So I don't talk about what I do because I'll get the worldly explanation for how the world works. It's fine with me if other people want to believe it, but I can't go there anymore.
One thing that I wonder about, or I think about with the fluidity of life, I want to get to the bottom of things. I want to take things apart and see how they're put together and how they work and what's at the very bottom of the heap. And when I think about a fluid life, I think, well, what would that look like? Not just as an ideal or as a abstract paradigm or something, but can I think of any instances, maybe not of a fluid life, but examples of life not being solid? And I thought of three things that have always really interested me, which is coincidence and synchronicity and deja vu. So I've never really put much attention on deja vu, but coincidence and synchronicity to me are very interesting phenomena. And to me, it signifies the fluidness of life leaking out. You know, maybe there's a crack in my projection lens. Maybe that's how coincidence gets in. Prior to the 1700s, people believed in magic and fairies more. To me, this is examples of how life isn't solid. And then it got to be the rise of reason in the 1700s and imperial thinking. And then we have the Industrial Revolution. And now it's all about materialism. And we're still there, even though we're now like moving into more digital and whatnot. That's a whole nother something. But the paradigm or the consensus reality we've been living in is very much materialistic, material dominant. But there have been three people who have really made an impression on me. Consciousness explorers, I'll say. So Carl Jung is one. And I don't know if you guys have heard of Rupert Sheldrake and Lyle Watson. These three people have studied and experimented with consciousness. So you got Carl Jung. He was like a psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, a psychologist. He studied consciousness, and he proposed that coincidence are events meaningfully related, but not causally connected. And he called it synchronicity. Has anyone not had an experience of coincidence? When coincidence happens, for me, that is so cool. Like, I don't know what that is, but that's so cool. I wish that would happen more. Jung also suggested that the synchronicity is connected to the collective unconscious. By that, he talks about that we have an inherited part of the mind containing memories and impulses that are common to mankind as a whole. And again, I just want to be clear. To me, this is an example of not solid. Whether it's life being fluid or not, I don't know. I think a fluid life is something that would be different for different people, and yet not solid. And then Rupert Sheldrake, he's a biologist and an author, and he studies the interconnectedness of life. His deal is morphic resonance, which is a field or a force that connects all things. And he's written a couple of very interesting books. One is called The Sense of Being Stared At. And the other is Dogs Who Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. These are great books if you're at all interested in more than materialism. In the book, Dogs Who Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, he wanted to know if pets could sense their owners at a distance. That's what he was testing for with this experiment, to find evidence for his morphic resonance. So he set this up. This was in Britain, probably London, and he got volunteers through the newspapers with pets. And he would set up a video camera with a cameraman in the living room with the timestamp running. And it would be on all the time. And he was interested in when the dog would go to the window or the door, waiting for their owner. And he made the owners go through a lot of variables. It wasn't like, yeah, it's 5 o'clock, the owner always comes home, so of course the dog's at the window. But what he discovered was, and he worked with a lot of different families, but this one woman he wrote more extensively about, he would have her take the tube here and there. Okay, you should go home now. And when she decided to go home, the dog would go to the window. And then Sheldrake would say to her, oh no, don't go home. So when she changed her mind, the dog left the window. So that's, I think, very interesting. And then Lyle Watson. Lyle Watson is my absolute favorite ever. He's a biologist, an anthropologist, and a cultural polymath. And he has studied a lot of different things. I want to talk about his book, The Secret Life of Inanimate Objects. But he has a lot of stories about people who have lost things and then get them back. Someone lost their wedding ring in a garden, and then at the end of the season, it's in the middle of a potato that they cooked. You know, that kind of makes sense because it was all right there. But there's one story he tells about a woman who was traveling and she lost a favorite coin of hers. And it was unique in a way. And it meant a lot to her. And she had somehow used it when she paid for something. And then months later, and in a different country, when she was traveling, she got a bunch of change and her coin was in the change that she got. And then he also talks about a man whose car won't start when he's upset. And he'll take it to the mechanics and they can't find anything wrong. If he's fine, everything works well. But if he's upset, the car won't start. To me, this is just all very interesting, fascinating pieces of information. And it's common enough. What is that? And whatever else it is, its life is not solid. It's not solid. And then another thing I think about, our projections are what make life solid. Believing our projections, being attached to our projections. One thing I really love is paradox. Paradox is two contradictory ideas that are both true, even though they're contradictory. Paradox to me is where duality and non-duality meet. So when we stand on paradox, we're simultaneously in two worlds, duality and non-duality. When we stand on paradox, we are in both worlds and we are in neither world. So if we're standing on or in paradox, we can see what's happening in duality. And this is where we're living. This is what we're projecting on. This is the reality we're talking about, because here we are in a human body, obviously in duality. We can observe what's happening in duality. I can see the dirty dishes in the sink and I can go, why didn't so-and-so wash their dishes? And we can see our taxes going up and we can see a great surprise that we got for our birthday. All these things are happening in duality and we can see them. But if we have our attention on non-duality, of which we are equally aware from paradox, we don't have to identify with what's happening in duality. We can enjoy it or we can feel feelings about it, but we don't have to be attached to it. We don't have to be invested. We don't have to make it solid with so-and-so never does their dishes, right? And it's a silly little detail of life. And it seems like a silly thing to attach to or hang on to or use as an example of how we make life solid. But as far as I can see, that's how it works. Okay, talking about dishes, am I the only one that cares about dirty dishes in the sink? Is it just me? My husband and I have the best husband in the world, but he doesn't always do his dishes. I do it too. I'm not as bad as everybody else in the household, but I do leave dirty dishes in the sink against my own wish that they get done right away. And Tony will come along, and when he washes his dishes, he'll wash my dishes too. But for the longest time, I am not washing his dishes. I'll wash my dishes, and he can do his when he gets around to it. So this silly, petty little thing really froze something in our relationship. It made it solid. There was no fluidness. And I think sometimes when we talk about a fluid life or spiritual life, I know for me, it's got to be big. Living a fluid life means I win the lottery or some grand thing will make its way to me, give me all its bonuses instead of a clean kitchen sink. Here's another quote. This is from a fellow Frederick Dürrenmatt. Whoever is faced with the paradoxical exposes himself to reality. So when we identify with what's going on in duality, whether it's dirty dishes or higher taxes or our neighbor gives us all his leftover firewood, it doesn't matter, good or bad. But when we're identified with it, we're blocking what life is bringing to us. We just don't see it. It's not that it's not there, but our belief and our attachment is on our projections. A couple of other quotes. Oh, I like this one. This is Soren Kierkegaard, and he defines paradox as the eternal truth has come to existence in time. And I think that is so wonderful. Also, the thinker without a paradox is like a lover without a feeling, a paltry mediocrity. And I'm like, wow, what could be worse than being a paltry mediocrity? Oh dear. And Lee Lozowick, the Western Bible teacher, paradox can be perfectly understood prior to mind. So mind is making the film of the movie we're all in and watching and starring in. So fluid life, coincidence, paradox, and my experience is that the best way to not get caught up in our projections is both self-observation and objective observation. So whenever we have an experience and we're experiencing life through our senses, then the mind, as you know, jumps in, categorizes it, puts it in a box. All good, done. Here's your story. on to the next thing. And it goes pretty fast, especially in the beginning. We've got the story, the script, the red carpet, the whole thing before we even realize it's got nothing to do with what's real. And I wanted to make a comment about self-observation because I notice in myself, so I extrapolate that to mean that maybe others also experience it this way. Self-observation, actually, it's a pretty edgy thing to do, don't you think? It can get uncomfortable. I've noticed in myself that I'm, in one hand, afraid of self-observation because what am I going to see, right? What if it's bad? What if I see something that is so horrible or hurts so much that I just don't want to go there? And I have come to realize that if we think we're self-observing and it feels bad, then it's not self-observation. The other bit of this piece is that if we get out of our own way and if we stop focusing on ourselves, we can objectively observe circumstances and other people. And that's really interesting. Sometimes focus on me, what's wrong with me, what's wrong with them, they're not doing whatever, gets really boring. It's like that Viewmaster thing. It's same old, same old, same old, same old. And if we can objectively observe what's going on, it's super fascinating and interesting and fun. The world just gets a lot bigger and more expansive if we can view our circumstances and situations and not want anything from them. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about how life is fluid and we just make an illusion of solidness. And then how do we keep life solid? Well, mainly from our projections. This is from Lee Lozowick. I'm going to read two quotes here, but they're both from Getting Real, page 112 and 118. In the work, the only thing that changes is the way we see things. The actual content of our lives, why would it change? We have our homes, we have our families, we have our friends, we have the kind of music we like and the kind of movies we like. Why would any of that change? In essence, what we're afraid of is an illusion. We have this idea, this projection. Oh, if I surrender to God, I'll be thrown into a meat grinder and ripped to pieces. Really, that's the kind of projections we have. And then, so mostly what we're afraid of is our own projection, which has nothing to do with reality. So, our projections, our stories, and our attachment to them is not without use. So there was this one time when I was working in an office, and there were a couple of women I really wanted to be friends with, and they weren't so much interested in being friends with me. And so I came to see projecting onto them my lack of validation. I was putting something on someone else. They weren't including me. This is all my projection. They don't want to be friends with me, right? I never asked them, right? I never investigated. The point is, though, that if we examine our projections, they're going to tell us where we're holding out. Where is the thing that we're not dealing with? Okay, so for me in that situation, and I wasn't going in to examine and look at why do I feel like I'm not worthy or what script is this? And it's not even, I think, that we have to get answers to those questions. I think we have to feel the feelings that they bring. But That's to be avoided at all costs, at least from the world of projection, it is. So our projections can be useful because they do point us in a direction that we need to look. Our projections define our reality. And as I see more and more, I see there's more and more to be seen. One of my favorite phrases I heard is from Benjamin Disraeli, who was the Prime Minister of Britain in the time of Queen Victoria. And he said, "Never complain, never explain." I love that so much. People mostly understand never complain, at least the first layer of never complain. Besides that, complaining just leaks off energy that could probably be put to better use. Complaining about things makes them more solid. And they're not solid. I can complain about house taxes, property taxes going up every year, right? You could get a lifetime's worth of complaining out about property taxes. And it's not going to change anything. I'm attached to that. I'm attached to like, oh, the town's ripping us off. That point of view keeps things solid. So even though the phrase is never complain, never explain, it's more accurate to say never mechanically complain. Don't do it out of habit. If I don't like something, am I prepared to take action? Am I prepared to be responsible for it? Then it's worth talking about. But just to needlessly complain to complain just makes it solid and keeps it in place. And it's the same for explaining, which is trickier because we have complaining is bad and explaining is good. But both of them, done mechanically, make life solid. There's no room for life to be fluid with us. And I've noticed that a lot of explaining done habitually is we're trying to justify something. Or somehow we're afraid we're going to hurt someone's feelings. So we have to explain why we're not going to do the thing. I've written a book, a how-to book, and I got an email today, and the guy's like, "Is that US or Canadian dollars?" And it's US dollars, but the guy lives in Canada. So I start to email him back. I didn't ever send this, but I was starting to explain, and then I was starting to go like, "But since you're in Canada and I'm in Canada, I can give it to you for Canadian." On and on before I was just stop. This is the price everybody pays. And the value of my work, I was undermining it with the explanation because I didn't want to offend somebody or I wanted to be nice. Just as you go through your day, notice when you're driven to explain from habit. Often there's a good reason to explain. Even something simple like ride my e-bike. I'm going to explain to you a couple of things about it. Some things need explaining. But sometimes we're just setting a trajectory. Like that's what I was doing. I was setting a trajectory that is solid. And a fluid life cannot get through that. And I guess the whole thing about projections is that they define things. And it's the defining, I think, that undermines us. To me, once you see yourself doing obvious things that are not serving, there's a whole nother layer of things to observe that are a little subtler and a little subtler. And you just keep going down the stack of things to observe. So assumptions, which is another kind of projection, which is defining a situation. I was responding again to an email. I had an assumption about the other person's expectations of me. Let me see, how did it go? So I signed a contract and I sent the contract right away. Like these are the little details, the day-to-day stuff that gives us clues of how we set ourselves up, how our projector works, what our script is showing us. So I got an email. This editor sent me a contract. I signed it and I sent it back. And then I heard from her 10 days later, and she's like, oh, hey, could you send me the contract? And I got back to her and I said, oh, I thought I did that right away, but here it is again. And I sent it to her and she was like, oh, thanks. No, I don't think you did it. And I went and looked in my sent file and there's the contract. And I had sent it to her. And so right away, I want to email her and say, no, look, here it is. I did send it to you when I said I did. Well, what is behind me going, oh, yeah, look, I did what I said I did. This was a big epiphany for me. I'm just reacting. No, I'm right. And I was talking to a friend and telling her about this situation and about how I almost responded, no, look, here it is. And she said, well, maybe you just wanted her to know you're reliable. And I thought about that, but I don't think that was it. Is it just about being right? But it's those little things.
For me, the biggest edifice, you were talking at the beginning of building a floor, the biggest edifice for me is who or what I think I am, which has changed. It keeps on changing over time. And so letting go of that idea then helps me open to a greater sense of fluidity.
The issue for me is that I want to hold on to this fixed idea of myself, even though it's changing all the time, from one year to the next, or from one chapter of my life to the next. But regardless of whatever chapter I'm in, I unconsciously just want to hold on to this fixed idea, even knowing that I can't do it. Understanding that doesn't seem to matter. And nothing that I do can make that any different, really. But I can bring some consciousness to it, some awareness to it. And I do notice that there are times when there's just a free state, when I'm not fixated on myself and I'm really living a fluid life for no reason, really. One thing that you were saying about trying to make things solid is painful.
Yeah, I think we sell ourselves short and we sell life short when we make things solid. My experience has been if I can just go with what shows up, I'm happier. I'll have a lot more fun. And it's a lot less weight that you're carrying. I've been working with making a practice of going with whatever shows up. And so I've said yes to a couple of big projects that take a lot of time, way more time than I thought they were going to take. And other people's plans that I've said yes to. And I found that even though I took on too much, it's all working out. Okay, so I had a friend come to visit. They were going to show up on a certain day. And then she got a hold of me and said, oh, this has happened and that has happened. And so I'll be a day later. And at one point, how I would have seen that, for example, would be like, oh, I already made those plans for us and that's not going to work out and that's too bad. And I would have a story about it. Whereas if I just say yes, okay, no problem. If I can see things as no problem, then I found that what shows up in its place is just as good or better. If I don't try and project my preferences and even right down to the weather, I got to tell you guys, every summer for the last 15 years, people have been like, it's going to burn this summer. And some summers it does burn, but the confidence that this is what's going to happen can we just let it show up, whatever shows up? What's showing up this year is endless rain. If we, as much as we can, not put our preferences out there, even on the weather, even on, oh, I had plans for these days, but it hinged on it being sunny out and now it's raining out. And if I get stuck on the fact that I'm unhappy because it's raining out and what I wanted to do didn't happen, I'm going to miss the better thing that shows up. Again, another small example, but it's exponential. It will ripple out to all kinds of things. Yeah. So my thing that I wanted to talk about was solidity is an illusion and how we make it solid.
But most people, I would say, don't consider solidity to be an illusion. This table is solid, and some people may think that to think that it's not solid is not reality-based.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I mean, the way that you've explained it, the way that you've looked at coincidence, it seems like you have that sense, but many people do not.
So we're back to paradox. Yeah, there's this table. If this house fell on it, it's game over, right? It's solid. If you deal with duality from duality, you stop the flow. Now, non-duality, trying to handle duality and saying it's all an illusion, it's all fluid, doing it that way doesn't work either. We have to stand between the two. So there are stories. For some reason, I seem to think that there was a Time magazine cover, and I think maybe it was a tornado in Texas or somewhere. And the whole town was flattened except for this one house in the middle was still standing. And the guy who lived there said he sat and meditated throughout the whole tornado. And his house did not get blown apart like the rest of them. Referencing duality from duality, yes, it is solid and we live there, right? But mostly I think we're lucky if we get glimpses of being able to see how life is fluid and to affect and influence things if we're not attached to how they are, even down to the table.
From duality, yes, everything is solid. But what is non-duality? Some of us have had an experience of that.
Of non-duality?
Yeah, and maybe everyone has. I'm not sure, but maybe they're not in touch with that so much.
In the past, we have worked with the idea of the vertical conversation and the horizontal conversation.
Would you explain what that means?
Well, the horizontal conversation means a table is a table is hard, it's wood. That's what I can expect in any future situation with a hard wood table. This is what that is. The vertical conversation creates a different dimension of interaction and relationship with the table. Yes, okay, it's a wood, hard table. But if I develop an open relationship with that table, it can become what it is I want to relate to this table as. And it does create a different dimensionality in the whole thing.
It just seems that there's a lot that's unexplainable about life. And we try to explain everything and nail it down. And when we do, we lose this fluidity and the joy of life.
Yeah, I would go with that. I think that's the main thing. It's being attached to anything like outcomes, again, our projections that we use to define our world. We have this idea, I think, that if we let go of them, we're going to lose something, maybe ourselves. But it goes back to that first quote from Trungpa. All our projections and our definitions, all we're doing is extending the floor. but we're standing on the ground anyways. We don't need a floor, but we're afraid we're going to fall off, as he says. And so we project and we assume and we have expectations and preferences and all this to save ourselves because we're scared we don't exist. And we hold on to that so tight that we don't realize that letting go of that is what we're looking for. If we would just let life live us instead of imposing ourselves on it, I don't know if we would know we exist, but it's more like it wouldn't matter.
But I think that also to pretend like there's not a car coming at you as you're walking across the street, or to say that it's not solid, or that this table's not solid, and so I'll just walk into it and knock things over, is not the same thing as not seeing everything as solid, because there's something about practically relating to life as it is. And in this world of form, this does exist. It seems to me like it's a matter of context and not content. There's the form of things, but there's the way of relating to it as if it's not permanent and something that we have to hold on to.
Yeah, sure. So when you're saying the table exists, to my mind, you're talking about nouns. Okay, nouns are solid. Life, we live life, like time passes, our hair grows or it falls out, or the kids grow older, or the house needs another paint job. Living is a verb, right? But what I'm saying is that we turn the verb into a noun when we make it solid. So it's just like the same thing over and over again. We turn everything into a table. I guess I'm assuming, I am assuming, and I could be wrong, that the people who listen to this talk or these talks, they would be people who could sense the essence of what we're talking about and know that we're not talking about the solidity of tables, or I'm not talking about a table being solid. I'm talking about life, living a fluid life. So life is the topic here. And we make it as solid as a table, but it's more fun if it's not solid. Suddenly, this table could be filled with a feast.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, because it could be more fun, but it could also be more scary.
Why? Do you remember me reading this quote? Oh, if I surrender, I'll be thrown into a meat grinder. That's our projection saying that it will be scary. I only have my own experience to speak from. So, such as my experience is, it's just so much more enriching and nurturing.
It seems like we could cultivate or get used to the idea of not trying to hold on so much.
And I think it works like every little bit you can let go, even just the smallest bit, you will experience an equal amount of freedom or lightness that encourages us to go on and let go of bigger and bigger things, because letting go of the small things like, oh, well, that wasn't so bad. And as a bonus, the neighbor cut my grass. I stopped thinking he was such a jerk, for goodness sakes. And I let go of him being a jerk. And you know what? He's actually a really nice guy. He came over and cut the lawn. So we can only experiment and experience what happens for ourselves. But it's so worth it. Just like start with whatever you can start with and see what happens. See what that does for you. So in this jumping around talk, what to do about making things solid. And I found that besides examining our stuff to see where we're holding out, being honest about what we are up to is really key. And being honest with ourselves and with others, whatever that is. Let's say I'm a kleptomaniac and I was, hey, yeah, can I spend the night at your place? And by the way, I'm a kleptomaniac, right? I'm not going to try and hide it. If we could just be upfront about who we are, which also means we have to know what we're up to so we can be honest about it. Or even I have this bad habit. I eat 5 boxes of potato chips every day. That's only a slight exaggeration. Honestly, I'm killing myself with potato chips, right? And if I can go like, okay, I'm eating all these potato chips and I'm getting older, so my body isn't digesting it as well. So my skin is drying up and I have hair growing out of my ears and all this stuff is happening because I refuse to give up my potato chips. If I'm honest about that, I can go like, well, what do you want? Are you okay with having hair growing out of your ears and your skin's drying up? If you're okay with that, if I accept that those are the consequences, I'll probably die 10 years earlier, or I can give up potato chips. Well, maybe tomorrow I'll think about it again. I'm just going to eat these salt and vinegar. As much as we can be honest with ourselves about what we're doing and be okay with that and be responsible with that. As much as we can, we don't want to harm ourselves or others. We don't want to create suffering. And yet sometimes we do. But can we see it? Can we be honest? I lose my temper. This isn't true, but it could be. I lose my temper all the time and I break all these plates all over the kitchen floor. If I'm honest about that and I see nobody's ever home, I'm so lonely. Why isn't anybody ever home? All these dirty dishes were in the sink, so I just broke them all. If there's honesty, then there's the option to do something about it. Whether it's me going, gee, I'd really like my family to come home once in a while. Maybe I should stop breaking plates and get help, as opposed to like breaking plates and then trying to clean it up and hide them. And, oh, look, I got new dishes today. I don't know that I can ever explain for anybody, or if anybody can, what it's like to just stop being attached or believing in our projections. But when it happens, it's a happy thing. It's a joyful thing. And then the more joyful we are, then that ripples out to the people around us. And also a good place to look at letting go is the whole us against them dynamic. If someone else has good fortune, and this to me has been a very hard practice, but very worth it. If someone has good fortune, that my projection is that it should be mine. If I can just let go of that, because if it was mine, it would be mine. But if it's theirs, it's theirs. So why not be happy for them? Why not congratulate them? Like, it just makes such a difference, both for myself and for other people.
That allows for a lot of fluidity.
Yes.
So you're able to let that go and a lot more joy, rather than solidity, holding on to this bad feeling toward anyone, enmity toward anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments or anything occur to anyone about this principle of fluidity that we're talking about?
I just want to make it clear, I don't want that table.
It's important to be specific about that stuff.
Well, we've got a party-sized bag of potato chips.
Oh, we did have.
for right after.
Does anybody want to say anything about their experience of either letting go of defining things, any kind of projections, or share anything about a time when they did let go of something, what happened?
During a recent meditation retreat, I was attempting to focus on one point between the eyebrows, but try as I might, my mind was distracting me to go any place but that place, to do whatever I needed to do thought-wise to avoid focusing on that one point. So I've been wondering if the fear of letting go has anything to do with the need to have some focal point that is solid. Because if I could relax and just breathe, I could focus on that one point. But then very quickly, my mind would go to a thought or an image or some scenario would arise that was very provocative in terms of taking me away from that one pointedness. So that's the only consideration that I have about it is, does the mind require some focal point in order to really let go and have a sense of safety?
Oh, the mind? Probably. I would say yes, because it requires it, but you're not your mind. I have that experience too, where I want to focus either on the solar plexus or the heart. And then the mind goes off on its merry way and I'm following along. For me, I've found that just acknowledging that that's happened, putting the attention back, whether it's there for half a second or maybe 5 seconds or whatever, and just being gentle with myself around it. This goes back to like, if we just observe, oh, this is happening.
I think that what you're saying is that the mind is always looking for something solid, but you're not your mind. And I understand that sometimes viscerally, but most times my mind is just trying to make something solid. And I'm not even aware that I'm doing that.
Well, one reason that meditation can be a little scary at times is because I'm sitting, doing nothing, actually attempting to think nothing. It's the nothingness thing that scares me. And it goes back to this idea of not being solid, of not having a certain identity. And possibly, and I'm experimenting with this and I don't know the answer, but if I do focus, as I was trained to do, on this one spot, a sense of self can emerge from that one pointedness that I'm very interested in. I'm very interested in that sense of self that can be experienced as a result of having that one pointed focus.
Yeah. Well, there are different ways of meditation. So I can only speak to my own experience. But I have just sat and had the intention to be with whatever arises, whatever that is. And sometimes that can be anxiety or fear or distraction in a lot of different things. But then sometimes I do find that emptiness, that spaciousness, and I'm just there.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience.
Yeah.
And I don't try to grasp for that, but I remember that when I sit. That seems to be behind all this other stuff. And maybe that's closer to who I really am.
Yeah, that emptiness and spaciousness and all that interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get used to that, to get used to the idea, not just the idea, but to being that, rather than just to have it as an idea from the
Right.
space of somebody who thinks he's solid.
So I have one more quote I want to read from Lee Lozowick. What is life after all but an endless stream of surprises? At least it would be if we stop acting as if our foolish neurotic projections were reality. Only reality is reality. So I love life as an endless stream of surprises.